Well, we've had a few days to reflect on things. We've had a nice, healthy breakfast, or at least part of it. So it's time to think about Canelo versus Bivol and a little post-fight review. One watcher slash listener talked about how delicious my food looks and wanted a recipe. So yeah, this one. Burger from Rustler's. It's that smoky maple syrup ham that you get from Lidl. Very, very nice. Get the sort of plastic cheese with the Rustler, and you add proper cheddar cheese as well. But you use their sauce because it's a little different to normal tomato sauce. 2.5 minutes in the microwave. Pretty good. Similar price to getting one from McDonald's, but it doesn't always feel good when you do the healthy cooking yourself and make yourself a nice meal. Anyhow, on with the video. So, yeah, first of all, I didn't do a prediction or anything for this one because I hadn't seen enough of Bivol before. I knew he was good. I knew he had a very sort of Eastern European boxing construct. People might call it a bit robotic, a bit like Vlad, although not particularly. One thing a bit like Vlad, when he's moving away sometimes, he'll do the thing that Fury subsequently copied, which is just sticking out his left arm because he knows it's longer than Canelo's, and just kind of holding it off there, like, just a big long stick in the way. But clearly this is more of a combination puncher than Vlad. Doesn't have the massive knockout power, doesn't have the massive height advantage. But anyway, don't really need to go on to that. But I knew he was disciplined. I knew he had very good feet, quick hands, balanced and stuff. And obviously I know all about Canelo. And so my prediction actually was that, to myself and to other people in the Hatman's Element group, was that it'll be a Canelo points in inverted commas one, where Bivol would probably do the better work. But Canelo, being Canelo, would still take it on points. And it would just be another controversial win. And it was going that way after 4 rounds. In terms of the scorecards, as we know, all judges had it the same. And they gave the first 4 rounds, remarkably, to Canelo. And yet, it clearly wasn't. Maybe Canelo took one of those rounds, possibly. There were 2 clearly very different fighters here. That Canelo, everything he was throwing was a power punch, and his whole body was going into it. But when he does that, he has this way. Yeah, he's swinging heavily, putting in a lot of effort, barely throwing a jab. Really, just everything being power punches for the most part. But he's not off balance usually. He can swing, can even miss, and he's still very elusive, Canelo. And if you look at all the punches that were landed, very few of them were actually clean. Almost always, there'd be a hand in the way, or the head would be off center. Bivol has a very tight kind of V-shaped guard with both his arms most of the time. And even when Canelo landed with a decent uppercut, I forget it was in the first or the second, when you look at it on the replay, yeah, it lands, but it has to make its way up this V between his arms. So it loses a great deal of its power. And so Bivol's head is not massively kind of snapped up and back. And what was really happening, what was most notable, is that Canelo was using up a lot of energy because he kept having to get through those long arms of Bivol, and Bivol's greatest foot speed and his balance and his control. And Canelo just couldn't seem to do it. He was he was trying to get close, but the only place he could really land reasonably consistently was Bivol's left bicep. After a while, Bivol was obviously raising his hands up for the high guard, but most of the time, the shots were sort of being caught, and Canelo wasn't able to land actually to the body. He did land. His only clean punches I saw the whole fight, really, were a few clean body shots with that kind of right hook that he throws. When Bivol had put his hand up a little to protect his face, and Canelo went in low. But even that was rare. But overall, it was clear that Bivol was cruising. And if you were treating, I was just discussing it with Bogdan Dino. I don't know if it's the real one or not. But if it was an amateur fight, it would have been practically a shutout because all of those punches are not scoring when they're on the arms, and and although Bivol wasn't thrown particularly heavily, he was landing. And one of the points they brought out on the CompuBox stats was that every round, Bivol had scored in the double digits. And Canelo hadn't achieved that in any round. I'm not sure what point that was up to, and I hadn't seen the final statistics, but they were very much in favour of Bivol. But I can see how, if you have a bunch of judges that want Canelo to be awarded the victory, that, yeah, Bivol's only landing they're sort of arm punches. I mean, they're technically very nice punches, but he's not swinging his body weight into it because he's so disciplined. And even when Canelo was getting his breathers, as he was starting to do fairly early, certainly by the middle rounds, he was wanting to rest quite a bit, and just he would beckon in Bivol, and Bivol would get just at arm's length, and he would land a few would be partially blocked, were totally blocked. And Canelo, beckons him in because he wants him to get close so he can really work on him, and he wants Bivol to do the work for him in terms of getting up close to land a heavier shot with more body weight, perhaps. But Bivol won't do it. Bivol just says no and beckons him back out, beckons him off the ropes. And so Canelo begrudgingly, starts plodding forward. And again, Bivol can keep him at just the right range. So it was a tough night's work for Canelo. And he appeared to be getting very frustrated, didn't he? Probably 6 or 7 rounds in. He's looking tired, his face is reddening. And he doesn't seem to know what else to do. Bivol's too disciplined for him. If Bivol had thought, well, I could knock this dude out now, he looks gassed, etc., and had been sort of accepting the challenge and really trying to slug with Canelo, that would have given Canelo a chance. But Bivol was far too good for that, and too disciplined for that. And it must not have been very nice for Canelo when it's Cinco de Mayo, and so all those fans are there to watch him. And I wonder if that actually makes your level of fatigue go up more. When it's great, but it gives you such a lift when you're doing well, but when you're visibly struggling and not being able to land as you want to, maybe you feel more tired. The weight of all those fans, you can hear how disappointed they are because he had so few opportunities to really cheer and celebrate. And so, so that was really how it was going. So by sort of the halfway mark, I could see how you could have it possibly Canelo winning, because he does this thing that Sugar Ray Leonard, I think it was particularly in the Hagler, the controversial win over Hagler, and what he would do is he'd sort of dance around as much as he could for most of the round, but then he said this was a plan. He said it after the fight, obviously. He said, I wanted to make sure that every round that I could, I'd have some energy left to really work for sort of the last 10, 20 seconds, whatever. So the judges lastly remembered me throwing the quick combinations and me landing. And it worked, because I think Hagler actually, if you watch it very objectively, should have won that fight. I'm sure Beats would say that. I wouldn't speak on his behalf because he might get annoyed, but I know Hagler is his favourite fighter. And yeah, I think many people felt that Hagler won that, but it was a way of helping to help the judges do what they probably wanted to do, and award the decision to the real cash cow here. And Canelo appeared to be trying to do this, so backing off, as I say, to the ropes, getting a rest, and defensively, Canelo is exceptionally good, and Bivol said this afterwards. I was surprised by how good Canelo's defence was. And it's true, because if you watch Bivol, he's got such fast hands, very, very nice, neat, direct punches when he wants to. And yet, Canelo is blocking most of them, at least partially. Very few are landing cleanly. And so Canelo could conceivably have got in the heads of the judges by having this flurry near the end, but he didn't seem to have the energy, and probably that's because he couldn't catch up with Bivol, and he'd always have an arm. He'd always be getting stuck with more punches when he tried to get in close, and it was just it was almost like Canelo was snookered, and he ran out of ideas, and yeah, very very interesting. And so it went on. I mean, Canelo did get a little bit of a second win somewhere towards the end. Was it round 11? He found the energy to lift Bivol up in the air, and I'm sure for a moment or two he was contemplating slam dunking him down on his head and saying, if I can't get a knockout with a punch, maybe I can. I don't know what would happen if he'd done that and knocked Bivol out. He could have said, well, it was his fault. He jumped on me. The ref didn't seem to care either way because he got put down on his feet. But I don't know. I mean, the thing with Canelo, right, is he is a spitting image for Dexter, the serial killer. So you don't know what might have been going through the little fellow's mind. I mean, in another life, he could have been a Sicario, couldn't he? But yeah, and that's probably a digression. But yeah, so even towards the end, 12th round, you might remember with Usyk against Joshua, in a way, a similar thing. Vaguely, you have the big cash cow again, that everyone sort of wants to keep on a winning streak to make them money. In that 12th round, I mean, Usyk came very close to knocking out Joshua, didn't he? He was sort of opening up on him. But in this 12th round, Bivol was content to just take it on the scorecards. He didn't want to, even at that stage, commit himself too much. And, bear in mind the way the scoring was, what let me think it would have been, just one round, wasn't it? So I don't know which of those, which ones were Canelo's out of all the rounds. I know the first four were obviously Canelo on the judges' cards, but it might have been that 12th round was crucial. I don't know. So, but this was the point that the whole fight, many people that watch more of Bivol have said that, he was really sort of in first or second gear. He was just cruising along, keep sticking to the game plan, and it was working. So, great performance by Dmitry Bivol. It's remarkable that he didn't let the pressure get to him, because all the money that was on this fight, had he lost, well, no one would probably have even given Canelo the credit that he would have deserved if he had won. It would have just been another Canelo victim, wouldn't it? And yet Bivol was coming out in front of that crowd. He couldn't obviously have the national anthem of Russia playing. He couldn't even have the Russian flag, which seems unfair when Canelo is there with all of this Mexican paraphernalia, and they're waving around a Mexican flag over him all the time and stuff. And there's Bivol, like he's persona non grata. It's not like he's one of Putin's cronies, is it? It's nothing to do with him. And then you get, people, idiots like Vladimir Klitschko saying he shouldn't even be allowed to box and stuff. Why are you mixing sport and politics? They're not, in football, they're not even supposed to be mixed. I'm pretty sure the FA got reprimanded by FIFA once because the government said it was going to look into football governance and these things, and they were told in no uncertain terms that sport and politics are separate. But of course, all that gets forgotten about when there's a wave of hysteria. But anyway, we're digressing massively. But I'm saying it was pressure for Bivol, and would that make him more determined to win, less determined to win? Would he, feel there's a lot more on his shoulders? Perhaps, a country that appears to be despised and hated by everybody. This might give them a glimmer of light if he can win. Does that put more pressure on? I don't know. He just seemed to take it all in stride. He just seems mentally very, very strong. And he was even able to have a little laugh at the end when he was asked, did Canelo ever hurt you? And he says, yes, my arm. And he showed them his arm. And he was kind of grinning, but also he was serious because it did look pretty bruised up, his bicep. And then he says, I studied the Cam Smith fight. And if you remember that one, I mean, he took so many punches on that arm. It looked awful by the end. Don't know if it actually tore the tendon attaching the muscle to the bone or whether it was just the swelling, but it looked incredibly painful. And anyway, but yeah, he was, just enjoying the victory, but being respectful. I understand that after in the ring, Canelo was very magnanimous and sporting in the defeat. And Canelo said, it's a fight, you win some, you lose some, and, I lost this fight. But apparently afterwards, I didn't see the post-fight press conference and all that, but it seems that he said that most of Bivol's punches were, I don't know, light, or I blocked them or I defended them. He implied that Bivol never got to him, which his face would kind of tell a different story, because he was having his face worked on like after a few rounds, and it was getting increasingly damaged on the left-hand side of his face, whereas Bivol looked perfect, really, other than his arm. But either way, Canelo seemed to imply that, yeah, Bivol hadn't landed, and yet I'd landed on him, and I was landing the heavier shots, which was true. His shots were heavier, but perhaps he's unaware that you can't score punches landed on the arm. It's a tactic, and I think it's probably a deliberate tactic, someone with such a tight guard, hoping that in the end he'll just dangle his arms. But it wasn't him dangling his arms, it was Canelo that was dangling his arms, either through tiredness or through just wanting Bivol to try and open up and give him some openings. But as we discussed, that didn't happen, really. And so, I mean, I understand this is a tactic, deliberately hitting the guard. Was it Rocky Marciano that famously sort of said that, I'll throw punches, hit them on the arms, tire out their arms so they drop? I think it was Marciano that had that as a tactic, but I'm no historian of boxing, so I don't know for sure. So moving forward, people have discussed the Hatman, whether there'll be a rift now between Canelo and Eddie Hearn. Hopefully Canelo and Reynoso and the rest of his team are sensible enough to see why they lost the fight and how they lost the fight. But then again, in some ways, it appears they may have looked past Bivol, because they didn't seem to have any options, didn't have a plan B. Canelo's fitness level, to me, looked less, maybe it's going up in weight. Maybe he needs to think about, just working on his stamina and perhaps not putting quite as much power into every single shot. I mean, swinging and missing can tire you out. And after a while, you would tell he was pulling out from throwing some when he just knew he couldn't hit them. He couldn't hit the dude. And so he was no longer swinging and missing. It was to come out like a feint. But I think it was where he would have thrown. And he just thought, no, I just can't get close enough to him. I don't know if he can change much like that, because, he's into his early 30s now. And this is the way he fights. What is intriguing is about Bivol seems to be implying that he would go down to super middle and take the undisputed title off of Canelo there. I mean, I'd love it if that fight could come about. That would be extremely interesting. So they're locked in for a rematch. Then it's unclear what will happen. If Canelo, where he'll go next, what he'll do. If there's a rift with Eddie Hearn, who we know that they're best buddies, or they were, but this could change things, couldn't it? As for Bivol, he's co-promoted by Matchroom and World of Sport, I think. Is it World of Sport? Or is it World of Boxing? I forget now. It's the one that it's the Russian, or the, I don't know, Eastern European one, isn't it? Yeah, I guess I know all this stuff, sorry. But it's unclear. I don't think he's locked in long term, and the fact that Eddie hasn't boasted that he is would imply that he's not. And apparently he's been somewhat evasive about. Anyway, whatever. So we'll see with that. I mean, Canelo will still be the cash cow. He's still up there on the pound for pound list, obviously. But it was nice that for once that he could lose a fight and it be reflected just about on the scorecards, because I still think Gennady Golovkin had at least one win over him, in my opinion. But yeah, so can Canelo do anything different in the rematch? I don't know if he's even officially accepted the rematch. In a way, I'd quite like to see him fight Gennady Golovkin a third time before Golovkin gets even older. So maybe he could take on Golovkin as a tune-up for Bivol, give Bivol time to get down to, is it 168? And yeah, fight him at super middle. Why not? I don't know. it could be that the rematch clause states it has to be at light heavyweight. I don't know. But yeah, so we'll see what happens with that. Can he do anything different, Canelo? I think he could come in better conditioned, fitter. He's got to have a better game plan. He's got to think. He's got to see if he can. Normally, you see, he's good at cutting off the ring and he can corner people. But Bivol's footwork was so nice, he could just hop out and the tables would be turned. And it was Canelo on the ropes. But of course, Bivol would then back off. He wouldn't attempt really to pin him on the ropes. I think Bivol could have done a lot more combination punching. He only let his hands go with combinations a few times in the whole fight. But when he did, his hands were so fast and he was so poised that it looked impressive. So if anything, I could see Bivol being the one to ramp it up and probably still not be able to stop Canelo, because that would be risky if he really loads up on his shots. And he's not a noted knockout puncher. But I got a feeling it might be Bivol that puts on an even more impressive performance they fight again. But I think Canelo can improve. As I say, he did look a little bit lacklustre. He did look out of ideas. So they got a job on their hands if they take that rematch. And, if they have the same judges or the same type of judges, he's got a chance. If he can just stay defensively blessed, but then be able to land some stuff towards the ends of the rounds, in several rounds, and if he can keep his stamina all the way through 12 rounds, he's got a chance, and I'd still like to see it. Anyway, those are my thoughts on it. Oh, yeah, the comments on the vegan diet. Now, I'm not a vegan, never have been. My understanding of it, though, and I go with Hatman on this one, is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. And it depends a little on what you're doing the diet for. Are you training for power and to bulk up, or are you training to lose weight and or like slim down or make a weight? So, what are you doing it for? Now, there's one History Channel guy called Tick, a very great historian, brilliant channel, and he used to be a vegan, and he did an interesting video on Hitler and the fact that he for some time was a vegan. And I believe he changed a little towards the end of the war. I think he even possibly stopped being a teetotaler very near the end of the war. I forget, it was a while ago I watched the video. But one thing he said, he's known several vegans. I think he said he used to be one himself. I could be wrong there. But he was explaining that with veganism, your body can keep it up for a while. But then after a certain amount of time, you hit what he describes as a wall. And then suddenly all your energy goes. And I think he's talking about years here rather than months or weeks. But he's explaining you almost hit a wall and suddenly your body just says, no, I'm omnivorous. I need more than this. I don't know if it's down to the depletion of a particular nutrient or why that is. But this is his claim anyway. And he doesn't usually say things unless he can back them up. Anything he says tends to be packed with references. And this may be... this could be a problem, that we are omnivorous. And so, he might want to have a little think about his diet. Maybe some, high quality Mexican beef might improve his stamina. I don't know. The reason why I had to do with Hitler, by the way, was because it was a thought that maybe this is one of the reasons why Hitler just thought he was dying half the time and appeared to be getting a little bit more erratic in his behaviour and wanted to rush things because a lot of the symptoms he was getting were perhaps more due to, because he's getting a lot of stomach troubles, more due to his veganism than anything else. But anyway, that's a bit of a digression. So, yeah, would Canelo even consider a different trainer if Reynoso doesn't have a plan B for Bivol? I don't know. Anyway, anyone that listens to this, sorry I don't have any new insights, but as I'm a bit lacking in content at the moment because I'm trying to write up a pharmaceutics thesis, and it's a bit boring, but it takes a lot of time. So yeah, this was just a quick one about, Bivol Canelo, and congratulations Dimitri Bivol. Seems like a nice guy, and certainly brilliant athlete, and look forward to seeing him again. Okay, thank you.